Guys, before I start this video, I'll lay my cards on the table. If you guys watch the podcast, you know I'm picking Nathan Cleverly. I've picked Nathan Cleverly to win the fight, and I bet fairly heavily on Nathan Cleverly to win the fight. So obviously, I'm ecstatic with the result. I've been a huge fan of Nathan Cleverly from the early days. Cleverly's been one of my favourite fighters from day one, when he was with Frank, well before he fought Tony Bellew and became a world champion the first time round. I was always a Joe Calzaghe fan. Joe Calzaghe is really one of the reasons I got into boxing as a youngster. And I see so much of Nathan Cleverly, so much of Joe Calzaghe in Nathan Cleverly. I would admit Nathan Cleverly is a slightly poorer man's Joe Calzaghe, but nevertheless, and you know, I've been a huge Cleverly fan. I've sat ringside at Cleverly fights, and I've been blown away by his output, his hand speed, his punches. But I've got to say, the Nathan Cleverly we saw in there tonight wasn't the same Nathan Cleverly who I've followed and I've supported throughout his career. I always thought of Cleverly on the way up as a decent boxer, a guy with incredible hand speed, a guy with incredible combinations, a guy with a good jab, and a guy with a thinking boxing brain. I remember I was ringside for his fight against Krasniqi, and he was walking Krasniqi down, throwing the jabs, positioning him in the corner. He'd sort of slip a few punches, and then he'd come in with like real quick combinations, you know, that you could barely see the hands moving ringside, they were so quick. That seems to have completely gone from his game. He's now walking forward with his chin in the air, making little or no effort to block punches, making little or no effort to throw his jab. And Cleverly's punches, which at their very best are so fast, so snappy, so crisp. To me, that's all gone. His punches seem laboured. He's become so into the warrior mentality of just walking forward, throwing a million punches, leaving his chin in the air. The thinking element to his game seems to have dissipated. The jab just wasn't a factor tonight. There was no attempt at keeping his hands in front of his chin. No attempt. And I had the fight evens at the time of the stoppage. I had it 3 rounds each after 6. But really, if you put a gun to my head and said who was winning, who was getting the better of it, I'd have had to have said Juergen Braehmer. From the early rounds, Braehmer was landing a straight cross on Nathan Cleverly, and it was landing with, you know, utmost regularity. It was hitting Cleverly. Braehmer seemed to be carrying the more punches, and Cleverly really made no adjustment whatsoever. He simply walked forward and poured on the output. Now, fundamentally, Braehmer being an older guy who's been inactive, who's maybe had stamina question marks in the past, I did wonder whether Cleverly may wear him down late. You know, I did wonder whether Nathan's evident fitness, his evident work rate, and I did kind of think perhaps Cleverly could potentially get the better of him in that sense. But really, Braehmer to me was showing to be the smarter boxer in there, the more intelligent boxer, and the harder puncher from what I was seeing. You know, so it's I've kind of got mixed emotions. I've collected my bet. I've got my prediction right. You know, in that sense. But at the same time, from a pure Nathan Cleverly fan perspective, it wasn't really what I was hoping to see in there. I thought that Cleverly could beat Juergen Braehmer on merit, to be honest. I thought that Cleverly could use his size advantage, establish his jab, outmaneuver him, land sort of crisp, clean combinations from the outside, grind him down, wear him down, and widely outpoint him. And I've got to say, if there's a rematch for this fight, I probably won't be betting on Nathan Cleverly like I did tonight, even though I've collected tonight, because it's kind of hard to say that Cleverly was the better man in there on merit. Having said that, Braehmer's retired injured, and you'd have to say potentially the work rate that Nathan Cleverly put in and the game plan that he looked to establish could potentially have had something to do with Braehmer's injury, could potentially have made Braehmer feel pretty rough in there, I guess. You know, I'm not completely taking out the stuff that Nathan Cleverly did do. But all of this, for me, you know, all of this standing in the inside with his chin up in the air and You know, he's got a good uppercut, he's got a good hook to the body, but that's not the Nathan Cleverly who got to be a world champion in the first place and who put a few title defences together. This is a new Nathan Cleverly that has kind of metamorphosised in the last few years. The Nathan Cleverly of old could move, could jab, could throw combinations from the outside. And I fear for his longevity in the sport, and I fear for his long-term health if really his game has simply adapted to strolling forward and having an absolute scrap, because I think he's better than that. I think there's more to Cleverly's game than just being the high-output tough guy. You know, he's got a good chin, he's got great fitness, but he's actually got skill. He's got a bit of pedigree in there, and we're not seeing that. We haven't seen that against Fonfara. We haven't seen that against Braehmer, at least not to the levels that I expected him to. So I guess all in all, what I'm saying is huge credit to Nathan Cleverly. He's done himself proud. He's shown he's an absolute warrior. He's shown he's a tough guy. And fundamentally, Braehmer has sustained some sort of injury in a fight where Nathan Cleverly threw a huge amount of punches and put the pedal to the metal massively. So Cleverly deserves the win, and my congratulations go out to him. I'm very pleased as a fan of his. But in terms of the future for Nathan Cleverly, I have major concerns. And I just wonder whether this performance is possibly some way into the decline of Nathan Cleverly. And as I say, Juergen Braehmer's not getting any younger. He's obviously got an injury. He might be out of the ring for a long time. They may rematch when Braehmer's 38, 39, who knows. But in an immediate rematch, if Braehmer was in full health, it would kind of be hard for me to pick Nathan Cleverly to beat him again. You know, Braehmer just seemed to me to be the smarter guy. So that's my thoughts on it. In terms of the rest of the light heavyweight division, I've got to say, and this is coming from someone, I consider myself one of the biggest Cleverly fans out there. You know, I've rated the guy for years, but could you see Cleverly beating Adonis Stevenson, Andre Ward? Could you see him beating a rematch with Sergei Kovalev? Hell no. You know, he's a level below those guys, and I'm sure there's big money fights out there for Cleverly now, especially now he's got a belt. I mean, let's say Kovalev beats Ward, and Ward wants a comeback fight in a year's time. There's pretty big money fights out there for Cleverly. What I'd like to see him do now is I'd like to see Eddie Hearn give him a bit of an easier fight. You know, Nathan's had a fight at cruiserweight against Bellew, who's now a world champion. He's had the Kovalev fight. He's had the Fonfara fight where they broke the punch stat records. He's had this fight, which was a tough fight, even though it was only 6 rounds. I'd like to see him go back to Wales now, have a defence, a first defence in front of his home crowd, where he can try and use some of his skills and try and box a bit more, rather than having to rely on being the fitter guy and having the better chin. You know, I think he needs to drop down a level or two for his very first defence. Just give him a break from this sort of level and keep him a bit more active. He's only a young man, he's still in his 20s, and you know, it's bizarre to say he needs to rebuild after a win, but I kind of feel like his career could go one of two ways here. He could be a high-class opponent who sells his belt, or he could try and rebuild, try and put together 1 or 2 quick defences against lesser opposition, try and work on a few of his fundamentals and rebuild from there. He's still a young man. Fundamentally, I don't believe his trainer is the right man for him. I don't know his trainer personally. I don't know too much about his trainer. What I do know is his trainer is not an out-and-out boxing guy with a huge pedigree of training world champion boxers. And it seems to me that the advice Cleverly's getting in terms of the boxing technical side of the game is somewhat lacking. So I'd like to see maybe a assistant trainer. I'd like to see him going to someone who tries to focus more on skills than being an absolute warrior. And I think that would stand him in good stead as he moves into his 30s. Because fundamentally, the game of pouring on the gas and throwing 1,000 punches in a fight is a young man's game. Nathan Cleverly is still a young man, but he's starting to move into his 30s, and that style is not going to age overly well. Let me know your thoughts, people. What was your take on the fight? How were you scoring it at the time of the stoppage? Had the injury not occurred, who do you think would have won this fight over the 12-round distance? Am I being harsh on Cleverly? Just give me your take on it. Leave your comments below. I'd be interested to discuss. If you've enjoyed this video, take the time to hit the thumbs up button. I'm going to do quite a few videos tomorrow. There's one coming on the Tyson Fury situation, one coming on David Price, one coming on Izzy Ugonov. So if you're interested in checking out any of them, please hit the subscribe button. Many thanks for watching, people.